This is the 5-minute guide to the HMCS Haida, a tribal-class destroyer of the Royal Canadian Navy. The Haida is the only surviving member of the tribal class of destroyers, and served in the Second World War as well as the Korean War, entering service in 1943, and leaving service in 1963. As Canada's most successful warship in terms of surface vessels sunk, it has been called the fightingest ship in the Royal Canada Navy. I guess that is a word they use in Canada. The Haida was built in England, being laid down in September 1941, launched in August 1942, and commissioned in August 1943. The ship was named after the Haida people of the Pacific Northwest coast, part of the native Canadian tribal groups collectively now known as the First Nations. As a later addition to the tribal class, the ship was equipped somewhat differently to the original armament specifications of the design. The main battery consisted of 3 twin 4.7-inch gun turrets instead of 4, with the upper forward turret replaced by a twin 4-inch high-angle mount for better anti-aircraft fire. A quadruple 40mm mount and 6 single 20mm guns completed the anti-aircraft battery. A quadruple torpedo launcher, 1 depth charge rail and 2 depth charge launchers completed the weapons loadout. It also came with an array of radar, sonar, and fire control equipment that meant its ability to hunt underwater, surface and airborne threats was greatly enhanced compared to the original specification, and reflected what surviving tribal class destroyers were being refitted with. The engines were able to achieve 36.5 knots maximum speed with an in-service limit of 32 knots, making it one of the faster examples of the class. The ship joined the British Home Fleet and first saw action escorting Arctic convoys to and from Russia. In this role, the Haida was part of the escort of convoy JW-55B when it came under attack from the German battleship Scharnhorst, but as part of the convoy close escort as opposed to the distant escort, it was responsible for ensuring the ships reached port safely as opposed to chasing down the raider. In January 1944 she was reassigned to the 10th Destroyer Flotilla, based on the UK southern coast, and took part in a number of sweeps of the Bay of Biscay and the English Channel in company with other tribal-class destroyers and 2 Ditto-class cruisers, the Black Prince and Bellona. This was somewhat ironic, since these vessels were the other half of the design lineage that had resulted in the tribal class, both ships sharing a starting point as the interwar period design V. In late April, the Haida was involved in 2 battles with German destroyers. The first saw the T-27 and T-24 damaged and forced to return to port, whilst Haida sank the T-29. A few days later the 2 damaged vessels had been repaired, and the Haida along with the Athabaskan engaged them. The Athabaskan was torpedoed and sunk whilst Haida drove the T-27 aground and set it on fire. Haida rescued 44 survivors of her sister ship before returning to port. Further operations in June saw the Haida and Huron take on the German 9th Destroyer Flotilla and sink the Z-32. Later that month the Haida and Eskimo went to investigate an Allied bomber dropping depth charges on something. After firing their own depth charges at what the bomber said was a submarine, they spotted the U-971 surfacing and sunk it with gunfire. The fun didn't stop there. Operating alongside other ships including the Polish destroyer Blucher, the Haida was part of raids during July and August that saw 5 smaller German warships and several merchant ships sunk. During one of these battles a shell exploded in one of her turrets and started a fire that killed her crew and knocked the turret out of action. By September the active ship was due for a refit, after which it was back to the Arctic convoy duties. As part of the escort of convoy JW-66, the Haida and Huron were targeted by U-boats, but responded by sinking 2 of them in exchange for the loss of HMS Goodall, which was hit by an acoustic homing torpedo. At the end of the European part of the Second World War, the ship was sent to take custody of a number of surrendered submarines as part of the 5th Escort Group. The Canadian tribal class ships were then sent to Halifax in Canada to refit in anticipation of the invasion of Japan, but this was suspended when Japan surrendered. After a year in reserve, the ship was refitted with a new armament layout which replaced the main battery with 2 updated twin 4-inch mounts forward and a twin 3-inch mount aft. The second rear turret was replaced by a pair of anti-submarine mortars. The anti-aircraft battery was also simplified to 4 single 40mm guns. With new radar and sonar arrays and a new pennant number, she spent several years taking part in exercises with the British and American fleets, before being sent to take part in the Korean War. This service was less eventful than her earlier missions, and consisted of aircraft carrier escort and shore bombardment missions, mostly against enemy railways. At the end of the war she was sent back to the Atlantic for anti-submarine duties, but an escalating list of issues caused by age meant that she was finally decommissioned in 1963. Although listed for scrapping, she was saved for preservation by private interests and was restored, although she retains her later armament fit. You can visit her in Hamilton, Ontario, in Canada. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments.